Hello, everybody. Um, I just thought I'd make a small little video on on my historical matches. I thought that was interesting because when you take your DNA test, um, you just get your main, what you have in your DNA. Um, like in my DNA, I have, well, I took Ancestry and 23andMe. Most everything is pretty much almost very similar, but each one makes sense though. It really does. Um, Hold on. Okay, here we go. Here it goes. Well, for my European, I'm 76.7%, which makes sense, of course. Look how light I am. Well, 50.6% is Welsh, which that makes sense because my mom, she's from Wales. My mom mostly has Welsh in her. Welsh is very big. That's all my mom. Now English, I have 0.3%. It's very small, but there is English in me too, which that comes from my mom and my dad because of the history of the Americas, but the history of Europe too, so it makes sense. And then Spanish Portuguese, that's my dad. 24.1% makes sense. 10.1% of me is Canary Islands. Oh, Canary Islander, sorry. And then 7.7% of me is Portuguese and Galician. Wow, that's my dad. Basque, 4.4%. Basque of Biscay, that's my dad. Andalusia, Austrian Castilian. Hmm, I'm not sure if that's my mom or my dad. It could be both. Ashkenazi Jewish, 0.8%, my dad. Nordic, 0.6%, which that's Norwegian, 0.6%. Yep, that's my mom. The Norwegian is my mother. Greek and Balkan, 0.3%, my dad, which is Greek, 0.3%. And it says Indigenous America of North America, which is in the plains of northeastern Mexico. Makes makes sense. That's my dad. West Asia, North African, 1.7%. And that is Arab, Egyptian, and Levantine, 1.7%, which 1.2% is Egyptian, makes sense, and 0.5% is Levantine, makes sense again. Sub-Saharan African, 0.6%. West Africa, 0.6% is uh, Ghanaian, Liberian, and Sierra Leone. Somewhere around there. So I'm 0.6% of that. And traces of ancestry, which is Southeast African, 0.2%, where that is about around the areas of Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, and a little piece of a Democratic Republic of the Congo. Makes sense again. Okay. And then some of my family are showing up with Nigerian too, which I have that too. So that is my ancestry. But in this thing, I have a trace of my ancient ancestry, which I only have 11, but as soon as they start to bring in more, I could get a lot more. But these are the main things that ancient ancestries share with my DNA. So I'm gonna go to that. And here it is. Meet your historical matches. And the first one is a early medieval Iberian. This is my dad's family. Back in, I guess this guy died around 566 CE to 648 CE, somewhere around those times. In Spain, he's a male, and I share 0.07% DNA with him, which is 1 centimeter center segment. It's one segment. So because it was way, 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 way back, of course it's just going to be really, really, really tiny. It says about early medieval Iberian. The remains of an early medieval Iberian, and it has numbers, like it identifies him by numbers, not name. They don't know his name. Were excavated from Las Gobas, a, a complex of 13 rock-cut caves in a province of Burgos, northern Spain. That makes sense. Based on radiocarbon dating of his remains, archaeologists believe that he basically lived during the first phase of the site's history, between the 7th and the 9th century CE, when Las Gobas served both as a home for local families and a place of worship and burial. In later centuries, the settlement was abandoned as a residence, and the caves were used only for religious and funerary purposes. And it says by studying his skeleton remains and DNA researchers identified this guy as an older adult male. Genetic evidence also revealed that several of his relatives were also buried at Las Gobas, including two of his cousins. Interesting. And another more distant relative, paternal relative. Ah, this finding reflects a broader pattern of strong family ties, often via the paternal lineage observed within the community. And it says when studying his bones, researchers also discovered signs of an injury that sustained during his lifetime, a fracture to his skull caused by a series of blows to his forehead, likely caused by a sword. So basically, he was probably at war a lot. The blow likely left a large diagonal scar, but it didn't penetrate his skull. He also had a fracture in one of his bones on his right hand, likely from a fall or a striking something with his fist. Oh, he must have been an angry man. Both injuries showed signs of healing, indicated that they were not fatal. It says genetic analysts also show that likely most people buried at Las Cobas had primarily European ancestry, which makes sense, with little to no North African ancestry, which in my family, it would have a little North African. This finding suggests that the genetics of Las Cobas community remained relatively unaffected by the by the major population changes associated with the Islamic expansion into Iberia after 711 CE. Makes sense because um, it was North Africa and the Arabians that basically um, invaded part of Spain and took it over, and it became a Muslim community at that time. And the other side of Spain was a Christian community. It was so weird. And it says researchers also found short stretches of DNA where were had inherited identical sequences from both parents. Ah, a sign that his parents were just distantly related. Makes sense. I think most of people's families, they just don't realize it, but most people families are related as long distant families within the family. Maybe that's why a lot of us have so many issues. I don't know. And it says the pattern also is often found in small or isolated populations that have little outside contact. Such genetic isolation may help explain why Lascaux community showed fewer signs of outside influence compared with many other Iberian populations during the time of political and cultural appeal. That makes sense. So this guy is a very distant relative to me. Like I said, he shares DNA with me 0.07%, 5.17 centimorgans, 1 centimeter that he shares with me. So that means he's a very long distant cousin, like long time ago. Okay. And let's see. I have another one. Hmm. I guess this one is a high status Viking woman. A high status Viking woman. This has to be from my mom's side of the family because my mom, she's definitely has Viking ancestry, big time. Um, she is from. They say that it died around 800 CE to 900 CE, Common Era, in Ireland, female, and she shares 0.06% DNA shared one segment with me, which I don't understand because we don't have Irish in our DNA, which I mean, it could explain maybe she migrated from somewhere else, and then she settled in Ireland and then died there instead of where she originally came from. That's what I'm thinking. And I'm going to give you some information about her, about high status Viking women. The grave of high status Viking women, and they give a number again in alphabets about who she is. They just know that she's a high Viking woman of status, but they don't know her name or nothing. was discovered in 2004 in Dublin, suburb of Fingles during construction work. The village of Finglas, I think I'm saying it right, I hope so, is thought to have originated as an early medieval monastery. Okay, it's like a church which housed um scriptorium. Oh, it's rooms set apart for writing where manuscripts would have been copied. Okay, okay, that makes sense. It says during the 9th century CE, this woman, this woman's grave was located just outside the grounds of the medieval church, the monastery, call it. Archaeologists who excavated her skeleton remains identified her as a female. Her genetic sex was later confirmed via DNA analysis, who died between the age of 25 and 35. Wow, that's very young. They believe that she was of high status, as she was buried with a number of elaborate burial goods, including a casket decorated with bone plaques and an unusual long comb made from an antler and other copper ornaments. Wow. Most no most notably, she was wearing a pair of oval brooches on each shoulder. The brooches were gilded, inlaid with silver wire, and featured images of animals with glass eyes. Ew, I would not want glass eyes. It says this style of brooch dated to the mid 9th century and was likely manufactured in Scandinavia. Okay, it says the DNA analysts reveal that she had approximately 80% Norwegian like ancestry. Okay, this makes sense now. Supporting the hypothesis that she or her ancestor were recent immigrants to Ireland. Okay, now this makes sense. That's why I said I know I didn't have Irish. So this makes sense that she was an immigrant, or her parent was an immigrant from Norwegian, which is part of Scandinavia. My family has Scandinavia. That makes sense now. And the burial is considered unusual by archaeologists based on the high status grave goods she was buried with and the grave's location near the Christian churchyard. It is also one of the relatively new burials of female Vikings in Ireland from this time period. Wow, very interesting. And right here it says she's a very distant relative, and supposedly I share 0.06% DNA with her, and I am 4.04 centimorgans, one segment that I share DNA with this woman. Um, okay, that was two. Now there's three. Okay, there's early medieval Iberian. Now this is my father's family again. His genetic sex is male, and the time period that he probably died in was around 900 CE to 1100 CE, which makes sense. And the burial location is Las Gobas, Llano Burgos, Spain. I'm just wondering if it's this guy is still a relative to the other guy that was earlier. Possibility. And this is about the early Iberian, which it states here, the that Las Gobas was a complex of 13 um cut caves in the province of Burgos in North Spain, which this was the same as the other guy. But here it says archaeologists concluded that he lived during the second phase, not the first phase. The other guy lived in the first phase. This guy is living in the second phase. So archaeologists conclude that he lived during the second phase of the site's use around the 10th, 11th century CE, when Las Gobas served exclusively as a burial ground or place of worship. In its early phase, 7th to the 9th century CE, oh my God, I'm talking too fast. I'm sorry. It says the site had also been a place of residence. And see, the other guy was a residence of it around 7th to the 9th century CE, but now this guy is between the 10th and the 11th century CE, which eventually served just as a burial site or a place of worship. And it says also, although the reasons for the abandoning of this settlement are very unclear, evidence suggests that the same community continued to use Las Gobas as a cemetery for generations. Okay. It says by studying his DNA, researchers identified him as a male. They also determined that his mother and father were buried at Las Gobas during the early phase. I wonder if the early phase, maybe that guy was his father. That's what I'm thinking. So maybe I have two of the genetics here from this guy and from the other guy. Maybe he's the father, he's the son. Because it says a mother and a father, and we're buried at Las Gobas during the early phase of the site's use. This genetic connection reflects a broader pattern of strong family ties observed within the community across generations. It says researchers also found short segments of DNA where he inherited identical sequences from both parents, a sign that his parents were distinctly related. Wow. This pattern is often found in small, like isolated areas where people are related. Then they intermarry and they have children. Sometimes it's not healthy to do that, but especially today, especially if you're too close. Now, if you're distant, like most of my family, I think a lot of my family, they don't realize it, but I think they're pretty much related, but I think they're more long distant cousins. Such genetic isolation may help explain why Las Gobas communities show fewer signs of outside influence like the other one, yes. And it says genetic analysts also show that, like most people buried at Las Gobas, had primarily European ancestry with only small amount of North African ancestry. Yes, that makes sense. This finding suggests that the genetics of Las Gobas community remained relatively unaffected by the major population changes associated with the Islamic expansion into Iberia after 711 CE. Huh. And with this guy, he's very distinctly related, of course. And he shares DNA with me 0.07%, 5.15 centimorgans, um, one segment. So he's like very long, long, long distant. And this is from my dad's family. Okay. Ceramic age Caribbean individual. This has to be from my dad's family again, because I think this guy might be indigenous. Um, I guess this guy is from 500 CE to 1500 CE. They're not really sure. It's like they're making approximate idea of it, but it's between those times. It says Puerto Rico male. Wow. Okay. And he shares 0.09 DNA with me. One segment. This is my dad's family. And I guess this was the time of ceramic age Caribbean individuals. This is when they started making ceramic um pottery and things like that. That's what they're trying to say. And I guess the genetic sex of this guy is male. And time period is between 500 CE to 1500 CE. Common error. And it says burial location. I hope I'm saying this right. La Lionos Tuna Site, Cabo Rojo Rajo 11, Puerto Rico. I don't know what that means. It's in Puerto Rico. It says about ceramic age Caribbean individual. It says sorry, I'm tongue tied today. It says ceramic age Caribbean individual remains were excavated in 1937 to 1938 from a site in what is now known as the Cabo Rojo Municipality in Puerto Rico. Shares a redwood pottery of the Ostinias style were found throughout the site. Additionally, the site included a bate, a type of I'm sorry, rectangular plaza surrounded by engraved stones, which served as the center of many Taino settlements. Wow. Yeah, this guy is definitely indigenous. Um, Bataeus was also known as ball courts, as a traditional ball game was held on them. However, whether the ball game was a true game or if it served a greater ceremonial or judicial purpose, it is basically a debate. They can't determine fully, really. Um, this guy was the only individual whose remains were recovered from the site. Through analysis of his skeleton remains, a DNA researcher identified as an adult male. He was buried laying in a crouch position on his left side. His skeleton was very poorly preserved, in part because the roots of a nearby tree had grown through the burial. Therefore, only a few skeletal elements were recovered by archaeologists, including fragments of his skull, pelvis, and long bone. By analyst by analyzing the soil surroundings um, of his burial, and the position of his remains, archaeologists conclude that he had been buried in a refuse heap and that his remains had likely been disturbed after the time of his burial. Wow, really? Basically, I share 0.09% DNA with this guy, 6.19 centimorgans, one segment, which this guy was from long ago. But in Puerto Rico, I know that with the indigenous in our DNA is very strong because my dad is a like 40, it has to be like 36 to 40% indigenous, and I'm only 21 to 25 indigenous, which just makes sense because I don't think I'm just one indigenous tribe. I think I'm more than one indigenous tribe, but I have to, that's how come they can't determine. But it makes sense that with um with people coming from the Caribbean and people migrating back and forth constantly, and then when they were removing a lot of indigenous tribes and they were moving them more westward, it would make sense that they started mixing more and started you know having different interactions with different indigenous tribes, and so it makes sense. So this is my father's family, that is for sure. That is definitely not my mom's, because my dad's family is the only one that has indigenous. My mom's does not. I don't think so, at least. Okay, and now this guy, he's a Viking age warrior. That doesn't surprise me, especially with my mom's family. Those guys can very stubborn minded, and they can definitely oh yeah. Um this guy was from 800 CE to 900 CE, Ireland. See, most of these people in Ireland, and I don't even have any Irish. And male, and he's from 0.06% DNA. I share with him in one segment, which makes sense. But I think, again, this is probably a guy that migrated, and it's not that he came from Ireland. He just maybe died in Ireland or settled there. It says Viking Age individual's grave was first discovered in 1947 in sand dunes on the coastal townland of Air Airport, Airport. So weird how in County Galloway, Ireland. He was buried in a supine position, with his head positioned towards the southwest and his feet towards the northeast. His grave contained a variety of weaponry, including a Scandinavian style. Okay, see, now the Scandinavian, it's in my family, not the Irish, but the Scandinavian. That included a Scandinavian style spearhead and shield boss. The central piece of the shield, he was also buried with an iron sword that dated to the second half of the 9th century, leading archaeologists to conclude that his that his is one of the relatively new Viking graves from his time period in Ireland that has been discovered outside of Dublin. Through analysis of his DNA and skeletal remains, researchers conclude that he was an adult male who died around the age 20-25 years old. Wow, that's really young to die. But back then, if he was a warrior, he probably died of at being at war. What else could it be? And then supposedly I share a 0.06% DNA with him, 4.34 centimorgans, one segment with him. And what does this say about the Vikings, anyways? See right here, it says Viking Age. The name Viking refers to a seafaring people originally from Scandinavia. Yep. See, my family do have Scandinavian. Present day Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. Yes. Who lived during the late 8th to the late 11th century. Renowned for their sailing skills, distinctive longships. The Vikings presents in Scandinavia, the North Atlantic, and the Baltic Sea area was so profound that the period roughly between 800 to 1050 CE in these regions is commonly referred to as the Viking Age. And during this time, the Vikings raided, settled in, and traded with others from these and even more distant regions, including the the Mediterranean, North Africa, Middle East, and even reaching North America during their travels. The Vikings not only impacted the culture of many regions, but also left a genetic legacy. They definitely did. Yes, sir. So this is about this guy. So there's some more here. I thought this was very interesting because, see right here, there's another Viking. This is my mom's family. Viking age merchant. Of course he would be. It seems like my family were very good at being merchants and selling and all sorts of stuff like that. That's in the genes. It says Viking age merchant. It says his genetic sex was a male. Time period 900 CE to 1050 CE. Burial location Kopera Koperasvik, Gotland, Sweden. I don't even know if I pronounced that right. That was complicating. It says Viking age merchant was buried in the Koperasvik Viking age cemetery just south of Gotland. Gotland is the largest island in Sweden and is located off the southeastern coast of Scandinavian peninsula in the Baltic Sea. Its position and long coastline, spanning approximately 500 miles, made it a center of commerce and trade during the Viking Age and medieval period. And it says through this excavation at the site, it began in 1917 and continued across multiple field seasons. The last of which occurred in 1966. This work revealed 330 graves dating to between 900 to 1050 CE. Despite the large number of burials found at the site, archaeologists have not identified any trace of permanent settlements nearby or studied of the soil suggest that the area would have been in hos oh in hospital in hospitable. Oh, so it wasn't good for farming. Instead, archaeologists find at the site, including things like silver and gold, jewelry and coins. So basically, the site was basically a place for trading, like merchants. They trade things for money, and the individuals buried there were likely visiting merchants who died far from home, which makes sense. It says through DNA analysts, researchers identify Viking merchant as a genetic male. Yeah, and supposedly I share 0.07% DNA with him and 5.19 centimorgans, one segment. I find that very interesting. Very, very interesting. And let me see. Wait a minute. Am I going too far? Yeah, that's the merchant. See, another Viking Age individual. This is my mom's family again. All these Vikings are from my mom. I don't think they're from my dad because mm-mm. And it says Viking Age individuals. Okay. Supposedly this guy's a male. His period was from 900 CE to 1200 CE. His burial location is in Shest Shestovista, Shestovista, Ukraine. Oh, it's in Ukraine. Very interesting. Okay, about Viking Age individual. The Viking Age individual was buried in the 9th or the 12th century in Shestovista. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Shestovista. I don't know. Archaeologists complex in the northern part of present-day Ukraine, which during the 9th and 11th century was part of the region referred to as Old Rus or Kievan Rus. Okay. Oh, so it had a different name back when. And it says the Shestovista. I'm not even going to pronounce that because that's complicating. Ar- Archaeological complex is considered to be one of the largest Viking settlements in Europe, consisting of several 100 burial mounds, and numerous artifacts of Scandinavian origin. So basically, my family just went everywhere, especially when it came to the Vikings. It says Viking age individual is one of only two individuals buried at this place in what is now Ukraine, from whom DNA could be isolated. It says through analysis of his DNA and skeletal remains, researchers identified this man as an adult male who died around the age 25, 30 years old. Wow, that's still young. The other individuals whose DNA was studied from the site was identified as an adult female, and DNA analysts reveal that the two shared a first degree relationship. Their shared maternal haplogroup suggests that they were mostly they were siblings or a mother-son pair. So it's most likely that these two were siblings or a mother-son pair. Hmm. And I guess I share a 0.06% DNA with this person and 4.559% centimorgans, one segment. Ah, these guys were everywhere. Ireland, Ukraine. Wait, okay. And now this is called the Samaritan period individual. What is that? Okay. I think this is a female. Yeah, it is a female. They call this the Samaritan period individual. And it says the genetic sex is a female. Time period 100 CE to 400 CE. Wow, that was a long time ago. And supposedly the burial site, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. That's crazy. It's in Hungary. That's all I know. It's in Hungary. Hungary. Yeah. It says the Samaritan period individual was buried in a medieval cemetery in Hungary, um, in what is now Hungary. The cemetery was primarily used during the Avar period, which was between 570 to 822 CE. But a number of earlier burials have also been recovered from the site, including from the Samaritan period. The Samaritans were a nomadic people who lived throughout Eastern Europe and Central Asia in a region known as the Pontic Steppe from the 3rd century BCE to the 4th century CE. They spoke a Iranian language and were skilled in horseback riding. Hmm. And it says, I guess this woman was one of 35 Samaritan period individuals who geno genomes were sequenced as part of a study of the genetics of the Evar period so that researchers could better understand the genetic structure of the region period to the arrival of the Evars. Through DNA analysis, researchers identified this woman as a genetically female. They also determined that she had two close relatives who were also buried in the cemetery, her mother and a sister. Her family was one of four sets of genetic related individuals from the Samaritan period who were identified in the study. Unlike many of the later Evar period individuals from what is now Hungary, I can't even pronounce that word. That is just crazy. It says her ancestry could not be modeled as having any detectable ancestry from the East Eurasian steppe. I don't know. I don't know who she would be related to. Maybe my mom, maybe my dad. I think mostly my mom. Hungary? I don't know. I think my mom maybe, because she does have German. I don't know. Possibly maybe my dad. Who knows? But 0.06% I share with this woman, and 4.45 centimorgans, one segment. Wow, this stuff is interesting. Oh, I only got a few more. And it says the Bronze Age Central Steppe individual. Okay, this is another one, but just of a different. Okay, this is the Bronze Age Central Steppe individual. She's a female. The time period is around 1617 BCE, before the Common Era, to 1498 BCE, before the Common Era. The burial location, I can't even, they have some complicated Dahazulu, which today is in uh, Ka- Kazakh. I think it's mostly like in the Middle East. Kazakhstan, something like that. Oh, Central Asia. Makes sense. I think this is mostly my dad. The Bronze Age Central Steppe individual in 14, that's her number, was buried in the western part of, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Oi Desha Yalahu burial ground in southern Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan? I think I'm saying it right. Kazakhstan. The site is located, I think this is my dad because my dad has family around these areas that did originate from there and then mixed in. Makes sense. And it says buried in the western part of, the southern of Kazakhstan. The site is located on a plateau approximately 1,200 meters, nearly 4,000 feet above sea level. Archaeologists discovered 51 Bronze Age burials at the site, including that of the woman, who they identified as an adult female via archaeological and genetic analysis. She was buried in a cyst or stone coffin like box, placed within a large four-side stone structure. Interesting. While archaeologists identified most of her skeletal remains during the excavations, they did not find her skull, which may have degraded following her burial or been buried separately. Interesting. But supposedly she shares the 0.06% um, DNA with me, 4.21 centimorgans, one segment. What is this about this people? Let me see. Let me get more. It says many of the languages spoken in South Asia, including Hindu, Urdu, Bengali, Punjabi, belong to the Indo-European language family. This is the largest language family in the world, based on total numbers of speakers, and also including languages like English, Spanish, Gaelic, Persian, Russian. All of these languages are thought to stem from a single ancient language, Proto-Indo-European, which linguists believe was spoken during the late Neolithic period or early Bronze Age, 4,500 to 2,500 BCE. While many researchers believe that the origin speakers of pre-Indo-European lived in the Pontic Caspian steppe region of what is now Eastern Europe, this remains a topic of debate. Many people are debating upon that. South Asia is also is also home to hundreds of millions of speakers of other languages, including Dravidian Dravidian language, primarily spoken by people in South India, Sino-Tibetan language, primarily spoken by populations in the mountains of North India, Austrositic language, Austroasiatic language, primarily spoken by tribal groups in the East and Central India. The history of each of these languages families in South Asia, and how the history might have been impacted by migrations of people with diverse genetic ancestry is of great interest to scientists, linguists, and archaeologists alike. So this woman was buried in Kazakhstan. Has, yeah, Kazakhstan. So that is, so basically this is a genomic formation of South and Central Asia, which that makes sense. That's my dad's family. Yep. And there's two more Vikings. It says Viking age individual, and then I'm done. Viking age individual, it's a male, from the period of 700 CE to 1600 CE. Oh, this guy is in the burial location I cannot Ytterstad, Ytterstad, Lundigen. I'm just going to say Norway. I'm not even going to make it complicated for myself. In 1889, the remains of Viking Age individuals were excavated from within a small mound on the coastal farm on the island of Finnøya in present-day northern Norway. Okay, okay. That's my mom's family. Through primarily analysts of skeleton remains, um, this person was initially identified as a female. However, this assessment was later updated to identify as a young male who likely died around the age 15 to 17 years old. Wow, that is very young. That's too young. This sex assignment was largely confirmed via DNA analysts, which identified this person as genetically male. His age was determined based on the fact that his rearmost molar or wisdom tooth had erupted, but many of his long bones had not yet fused, which makes sense. He was buried with a simple tool made of antler, which is typical of the Viking Age and Middle Ages. However, archaeologists believe that he likely lived during the Viking Age based on the style of his burial. And supposedly, I share 0.06% DNA with this person, 4.05 centimorgans, and one segment. And, oops. And this is a Viking woman. This is my mom's family again. Viking age individual. It's a female. The time period was between 900 CE to 1000 CE and Denmark, which makes sense. My mom's family, Scandinavia. Viking age individual was buried in a Viking age burial ground just south of Lindeless Nor, a shallow bay on the west coast of the island of Langland in present-day Denmark. The cemetery was first discovered in 1920, but was not excavated until 1980s, at which point archaeologists uncovered 49 graves containing remains of 52 individuals, which archaeologists dated the cemetery to the 10th and early 11th century CE. They also discovered the remains of late Bronze Age activity in pits that contained tools made of flint, antlers, pottery, and bronze fragments. Most of the individuals in the cemetery were buried in the supine position, laying on their back in an extended position, but several were buried in a flaxed or crouched position on their sides. Through DNA analysis, Researchers identified Viking age individual as a genetic female. So here, this woman shares 0.07% DNA with me, 4.91 centimorgans, and one segment. See, you know what I learned about this? I'm able to spot out my dad and my mom's family just like that. I know. But the amazing part of this is when you look back and you try to find your family, sometimes it's hard. You can only go back so far. But a lot of this kind of helps because you're able to determine that your family has been migrating for thousands of years. Because me, if they asked where my migration started, I would have to say it started from Babel. But my family's so mixed, on my dad's side especially. Um, I think that's why a lot of Hispanic and Latino people take their DNA test because they don't know. We don't know that part of ourselves of how mixed it is. And I think that's why the majority of people taking the DNA test are mostly Latinos. I see some people of other things that are doing it now. But it'd be nice to see like the African side doing it more and so they kind of help us out so we can find our, African ancestry. I found somebody matching me from Puerto Rico. My family's not even from Puerto Rico. But I think a lot of people, like I said, have been migrating for hundreds of thousands of years. And maybe when the Europeans came, they mixed with some of them. Some of them migrated and they came. There's a long history between, the US, Mexico, Canada, Puerto Rico, places like that. There's a long history behind all of it. And the Canary Islands and everything else like that. There's a lot of history. Like I said, I don't think I'm one indigenous tribe. I think I might be multiple indigenous tribes that our family comes from. And like I said, I know we don't our we have different white ancestors. We have different Jewish ancestors. I have um Ashkenazi and Sephardic. Um that I do know. Um And then we have our indigenous, like I said, our African. We have our African ancestry. And then we have like the mixture of um sometimes the Middle East and um places like that come into the mix. Like Levantine. I think that's more like Turkey and the Jordan and places like that, which makes sense again. Yeah, there was a lot of mixing, especially in my dad's family. And if you go back thousands of thousands of thousands of years, eventually the whole world goes into one family regardless. And if you noticed, um, it said that some of my family were marrying their own family. That doesn't mean they were marrying brother, sister. They were marrying like cousins, which I don't know. I think it was pretty much a common practice for the longest time, especially after the time of Moses, when you couldn't even marry your own brother or sister. I mean, Abraham married his half sister. Many people married their siblings and nothing ever happened because, like I said, they were closer to perfection at that time. But eventually, when it came to Moses' time, that's when the defects started to come in. You marry somebody that's close family ties, there could be issues with your children, especially if you're siblings. But if you're cousins and you're close cousins, there still could be defects. But if you're long distant cousins, uh, I don't think there's going to be as much of a problem, but I don't know. I feel it's still iffy that you share a family line somewhere. But when I look at my tree, I can see that too. I can see cousins marrying cousins, and I still see that today. They just don't realize it that they're long distant cousins and they don't know it. That's why I feel funny about ever trying to marry somebody that's Mexican like myself, or at least half of me, because my family is so big. How do I know I'm not going to be marrying like a fourth cousin or a fifth cousin or five generation? Mm-mm. Even though we were long distant cousins or something like that, we still have a geno together. And also in Europe, my mom's family, I was always kind of iffy about that too because I have a lot of family in Europe and you never know. You never know. Because I noticed through my family, through the family looking up stuff on my mom's side and my dad's side, there's a lot of cousins marrying long distant cousins and they just don't know it. Or just don't know it. Yeah, no. Um, but it's amazing what you can learn through history. This is history. I love it. I love history, the facts, the truth, the things that come from it, you know? And then also, I just wanted to do one more thing. Wait a minute. Uh, Patience is a virtue. Okay, I'm gonna do this. Okay. And here we go. In my ancestry DNA that I have here, see here, it goes, I have 16 ancestral regions to them, which is in southern Wales. That's my mom, 41%. Northern Wales, northwest England, my mom. Maybe the England could be my dad too. Mexico, which is the indigenous Americas. This is from the indigenous people. Mexico, 20%. Central America, 1%. And then Iberian Peninsula, northern Spain, 5%. Spain, 4%. Basque, 3%. Portugal, 3%. Canary Islands, 2%. West Midlands, and this is England, 9%. Devon and Somerset, 1%. England could be my dad too. And then Ashkenazi Jewish in Eastern Europe and Russia, 2%. Sephardic Jewish in North Africa, 2%. Ashkenazi Jewish in Central Southeastern Europe, 1%. Sephardic Jew in the Eastern Mediterranean, 1%. And then North Africa, 1%. So it's very interesting. You can see the mix, you can see the how similar they are from 23andMe and Ancestry. They're able to pick up almost all of it the same. But I know I do have a lot more. My African ancestry is in the North Africa never goes away. But my West African um most people in my family are picking up Nigeria and Ghanaian. And also but we all pick up North African pretty much. That um but the Southeast African, which is Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, a little bit of the Republic of the Congos, um, makes sense. Yeah. But then we have our indigenous. It's so interesting. I've been trying to trace my family back, and I think I mentioned this before. I was able to find certain stories about certain a certain Jewish family I was able to find back to the 1500s. Um, some African ancestry that I found, but they were already the mixed offspring, not the full 100%. And it's hard to find them. The indigenous, I can see that in the family too, but to get more details on them is it's been difficult too. Um, and then my mom's side, just the William berry is so common that it's hard to find the right berry, the right William berry. But I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna find certain things that I haven't found. I'm gonna dig deeper and see what I can find. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this. Um, you guys should try to do like some of this. Maybe we can, especially a lot more Africans from Africa itself, because you're helping us find our original ancestors where they originated from, because it's hard for us to find them because a lot of Africans throughout the Caribbeans, America, other places, Jamaica, anywhere there was slavery, and throughout out of all the Spanish, Latino, the Spanish colonies, now they're considered Hispanic Latino people. Sometimes they're as white as me. Sometimes they're darker than me. It depends. Sometimes brown, yellow, they come in many shades. But it would help us at least find the original family that we originate from. And then they can know that we finally found our lost family from 500 years ago. That would be neat. How would they take that now some of their family don't even look African anymore? Some of their family look Hispanic. Some of their family look white. How are they gonna take that? I don't know. But it's amazing. Truth is what it is. Truth is good. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this. Until next time, adios. Bye.